Alright, welcome back everyone to another round of solo sessions. We will be resuming once more with Morek the Dwarf as he continues on his personal quest to try and forge his first runic item, and we wish him the best of luck in his endeavor. That being said, as we resume, it is the day following your exploits in the Poor Quarter, where many of the manlings were hit by some sort of warpstone-like shard by the Skaven, and were immediately mutated on the spot into horrific abominations. You all have turned back to the inn after Otto Reichen ordered you to get some rest, and it has been a full day, and you're feeling much better mentally and physically.
Yeah, considering I took my first insanity point.
Well, even for a dwarf, that was pretty rough.
Yeah. So I'm probably still nursing a drink to kind of get rid of those images from my mind.
Okay.
But I guess I look around. Is there anyone new in the tavern?
No, it's pretty quiet today. Hulst even looks like he's a little overdrawn.
Okay. So normally, do I pretty much go to Snorri just about every day?
Yes, it is assumed that you visit the forge every day.
Okay.
To work on your runes. Of course, the only time we will bother narrating that is when you have to perform checks.
Okay. So I will walk over to Holst and see if he has any news on the day.
He shakes his head and says, "Afraid not, Master Dwarf. After yesterday's events, most of the town is pretty quiet today. Seems no one's on edge."
On edge about the Poor Quarter or the thing that got thrown at the gate?
At this, he shrugs and says, "Take your pick, really. Seems foul times are coming for the city. I've heard rumors of people beginning to evacuate and head to places like Altdorf or Mindenheim instead. Even Averland."
First sign of trouble and everyone scatters. Okay. So I will shrug and I guess I'll head to the forge.
Alright. You make your way through the city without too much trouble. You do see that there are increased patrols of guards, and everyone does. It's very tense feeling in the city right now. A lot of people are very nervous and trying to stay outside for minimal amounts of time. But you make it to the edge you make it to the forge without being harassed or anything along those lines. And as you enter, we'll put you over here for the moment. You see Snorri poking at something that's in his large furnace before he notices you.
Good morning, Master.
He looks up and frowns in your direction and nods and says, "I heard you were dealing with some issues down in the Poor Quarter late. Words reached us Darwy of what happened there."
I saw some Scar or Thagoraki. It's been an issue all of a sudden.
He nods and says, These Ungi don't know how to keep themselves safe. They let the foul vermin build nests under them until it becomes so much of a problem that's it's problematic to deal with, if even possible. They're not like us true Dawi, constantly clearing out the areas below them. Too scared of the dark, these manlings.
You'd think they'd have a more vested interest in keeping their city safe.
He shrugs and says, "They're cowards. They're too afraid to commonly face the fact that the Thagoraki are real and exist beneath them. They'd rather pretend they're not there until the problem becomes so overwhelming that they rely upon their greatest leaders to try and save them. Mark my words, Beardling. Many people are going to die before this is solved."
That is my fear as well.
He closes the furnace and turns to you and says, "Luckily, we've taken precautions over here in the Dwarf Quarter. All of our wells have been dealt with. And we've made sure to bring in purified water sources and good ale. We'll not be turning into those foul abominations, I'll tell you that much.
Have you ever heard of such a warpstone shower to cause such intense and immediate mutation?
He shakes his head. No, but I've been in the Ungi lands for many, many years, many decades. If they had invented some new, horrible abomination in which to do this with, it'd be something to probably talk to those who dwell beneath some of our greatest holds about. But alas, we haven't had a dwarf like that here in quite some time.
I did want to ask, have we gotten any news through from any of the roads?
He shakes his head and says, we did receive a gyrocopter that trade was coming from Zufbar, but they haven't arrived yet.
I'm sure Dorn would be pleased to hear of Zufbar's arrival.
He nods and says, I've also heard rumors that Barakvar is sending trade as well, but I think they're coming along the river in one of their iron ships. That being said, things should be pretty good for our quarter in the near future.
Is there anything you needed help on today?
He shrugs and says, actually, I was about to head out for the evening. I believe it's time for you to advance further on your work, if I'm not mistaken.
I was going to do that if you had nothing else.
He, sort of cracks his neck and says, I'll be back on the morrow. There are some projects we can work on. But for now, I'll leave you to it.
Have a good evening, Master.
He gruffly heads out.
Okay. I will go ahead and get started.
Alright, you approach the forge. You feel the winds of magic gathering around you as you have very carefully been inscribing the rune of stone into the... what was it you were working on? A helmet?
Yep.
So the helm before you, the rune is almost finished and just needs the final touches. And it's time to see if you've forged something that you can judge is truly worthy of bearing the power of a rune.
So what I want to do before I do that is I want to throw my collected Groby ears into the forge.
Okay.
As kind of an offering.
As a plea to Grimner
Yeah.
for success.
So I'm going to go ahead and just erase those out of my bag.
Alright. The Rune of Stone. Requires an inscription number of a 10.
Yeah.
So, we'll do these one at a time. Slowly and precariously.
Yeah.
Your first attempt to inscribe the Rune of Stone upon the helmet after a week's worth of work. Meticulously chipping away at it and trying to make the exact right preparations.
Alright, here we go. Nope.
Okay, your first fortune point.
Yep.
Closer. Your second fortune point. Oh my god.
Thank the gods. Thank Thungni. Thank Grimnir. Thank Grugni.
It would seem the gods have heard your prayer. As you lean over the forge, you can feel everything raging around you, and you very meticulously inscribe the rune into the helm, being so exceedingly careful, and it takes hours. When you finally finish the last little strike of your hammer and lower the chisel and see the rune perfected, you look up to see not only is it daylight, but you see Snorri Doranson looking very approvingly down at your work. You didn't notice him come in.
So I will kind of look up and blink at him.
He gestures down at it and he says, "Will it work then?"
Oh, indeed. It will.
He harumphs a bit and smirks and says, Perhaps you're not a complete waste of time after all, then, Beardling. He steps forward and gives you a very hard pat on the shoulder and says, "Come, there's more mundane work to do. Work some of that stress out of your hands."
Yeah, something to get rid of the shaking.
He nods, and he very reverently takes the helm and puts it very carefully on a bench to allow it to settle.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you have successfully inscribed your first rune.
Hot damn.
Still needs to be empowered and binded,
Yeah.
but you have completed the most troubling phase. Nicely done. Now, for anyone watching, he literally, if you rolled anything less than a 10, he'd have to start all the way over.
All over again.
Alright, after that, he has you work quite a bit throughout the day. You spend time mostly working on chest pieces of armor. For every day that will pass in this little series, you will be allowed to attempt to forge one piece of armor in that day.
Okay.
The larger the piece of armor, potentially the more days it will take. Though story may occasionally help you, depending on various things.
I think you have like an auto-tune going on with your voice.
Well, it's not on my end.
Okay.
So as long as it's not on my end, doesn't matter.
Okay.
Wow, I'm so glad you were able to do it.
I mean, I am. You have no idea how relieved I am.
Okay, he puts you to work almost immediately. So an order has come in for 5 shields to be forged for some of the newer dwarves that are coming in from some of the... They're coming in from Altdorf, rumor has it. So there are some new dwarves coming in that will require some new shields. You and he will each roll 2 armor smithing checks. Well, he'll roll 1. You'll roll 2 for each shield. If you're successful in forging all the shields, depending on the quality, you will be paid according to your service, though Snorri, being your master in this particular endeavor, will be taking most of the proceeds.
Yeah, I figured.
But, time to do your job.
Okay, so how many do we want to do? I forget.
He thinks that y'all should do 3 today.
Okay. So I will go ahead and get started.
Alright, roll your first armor smithing check. Nicely done. Okay, you forge the rough shape of the shield. He tends to some more of the intricate parts of it, and he does a very good job of inlaying some personal runes of the dwarves he knows that are coming and some of their requests, and forging some emblems for it. And he hands you off the emblems and looks down at the rough shape of your shield and nods approvingly. And you can now attempt an average check, which means no penalty or buff, to try and forge them all together into a completed product.
Okay. There you go.
Very well done. All right, he is slaving over the components for the next shield, but as you finish hammering everything on and working with the almost completely molten shield at this point, you expertly forge all of the various parts he's given to you onto the shield, and it looks spectacular. And as you put on your gloves that are designed to protect you more from the runic forges than mundane equipment, you throw down the shield, well, not throw down, but lay the shield before him, and he looks at it for a moment and looks at you and just nods once and then continues his work.
Okay.
Go ahead and roll to forge the next shield.
Okay.
Okay, you forged the rough shape. It comes out perfectly fine, looking well. He successfully forges another series of the emblems and other notable runic marks to go on it, and forge to put them together.
Okay.
Once again, absolutely impeccable work. It looks extremely good. You place it besides the second one, and he nods once more. And he looks a little longer at you the next time, and then he sets for the following. He does an unbelievable job on the final set of emblems. Go ahead and roll to forge the rough shield for it. Alright, and you make the best shield you've made yet. And he brings over the last series of emblems and sets them on your forge and watches as you forge the final shield.
Not as well.
Yeah. Let's see.
They kind of even out, because...
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
As you forge the last shield, he steps in and assists you as you bring on each piece, lowering over the shield, and he brings his hammer, smashing down on it each time. And through both of your efforts, you manage to make it at least on par with the two before, though it does require his assistance somewhat.
Yeah.
As he lays the third shield on the desk, he looks at you with a bit of a smirk and says, "Running out of steam there, Beardling."
Never, master.
He nods and said, "It has been a long day. That I can understand." And he looks down at the shields and says, "These'll fetch a solid price. We'll work on the next 2 tomorrow."
Sounds good, master.
He nods and starts to head out of the forge. However, before you return back to the inn this evening, you may begin the empowering step.
Okay. Yeah, I need to...
Or you can wait till tomorrow. That way you'll have new fortune points. You don't have to start it tonight. But once you start it, you may not test again for a month.
Let me see here. Let me reread it and make sure I know what I'm doing.
Basically, you have to take a runecraft skill check equal to the number of empowering steps the Rune of Stone has, which is 3. So you have to pass 3 runecraft skill checks in a row. But you can only take them once per month.
Yeah.
So the first, it's very important you get each of them right.
Yeah.
Because obviously if you mess one up, it'll put you back at least a month. So I would recommend waiting to start it till tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Alright, you go turn in for the night. As you return to the inn, you see that all of your compatriots are gone. And it seems that, and none of them returned that day. As you head out in the morning, as you head out in the morning, likely with a small smirk on your face and a slightly puffed out chest due to successfully inscribing your first rune away from the stellar forges of Karazakarak, you make your way back to Snorri's forge. And when you arrive, you actually manage to beat him in this morning. And when he arrives, he looks at you and seems to have, you can almost, you would bet a good amount of dwarf gold you saw a smile in his beard, but he hides it. But if there was one, it was gone very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And he gets to work forging the...
I'm still kind of overwhelmed at any type of praise I've gotten, so...
Yeah, and he gets to work on the next emblems.
Okay. Let me see here. Where's my sheet? There it is.
And you can go ahead and forge the rough shape for the shield. It's okay, you're both kind of in the same boat on this one. As you forge the rough shape, you look down at it, frowning disapprovingly, and you look over at him to see him looking down at the emblems he just forged disapprovingly. And he sort of looks at you for a moment, and then sticks both piles of metal back into the forge, waiting for them to melt down, muttering to himself. He seems annoyed when he pulls them back out of the fire and slams down the shield back in front of you and slams down the emblems back on his own workbench. Try again, but at a minus 10% penalty.
Okay. Oh, gods.
You both do terrible. At this, he sighs for a moment and scratches his head. And he turns to you and seems
That's always off days, master.
He frowns and says, "An off day for a student may be one thing. An off day for me makes me think some Groby got in here and messed with my tools." He shakes his head for a moment, and throws all of that work into the furnace and says, "As I also made a mistake, this will come out of my pocket. We'll make better use of those materials another time." And he starts working on a completely brand new set of emblems and hands you a new, unrefined clump of metal.
Okay. Jeez. Second day is not proving so well.
That's not good for him either. He looks down at another failed project and seems to like almost turn white with rage for a moment. And then he gently sets down his hammer and says, "I'm going to get some beer. I'll bring some back with me."
That is a very good idea, Master.
And annoyingly, he leaves. He'll probably be gone for a bit.
Yeah, I figured.
If you'd like, you may go ahead and try and draw the Winds of Magic into the first part of your rune.
Okay.
So after checking to make sure that you won't be bothered and locking the door to make sure you won't be disturbed, you begin summoning the Winds of Magic to you, and it spirals in a vortex, gathering around you till it's almost a winding gale, but you shape it with your hammer, and I'm now trying to force it with deft, powerful blows down into the helmet you forged. Roll your first runecraft skill check. Okay, you have 2 fortune points today.
Yep, let's go ahead and do it. What the hell?
One more.
I need more grubby ears.
Alright, you do not successfully forge it. The good news is, though, let's see. Yeah, you cannot attempt to empower it again for the rest of the month.
Oh, great.
As that check represents your efforts over the course of this month, but you will just be unsuccessful. That being said, at least it doesn't start you over from scratch.
Yeah.
You unlock the door as you progress with your work, though you have a bad feeling about how this one's going.
Yeah.
Winds of Magic seem to fight against you at every turn. When Snorri returns, he returns with a keg of some pretty high quality beer, and he hands you he gestures for you to hand him your tankard.
I will hand him my pewter tankard.
Okay, he fills it
Best
up.
quality.
Fills himself up one and passes you yours and downs his almost in one go.
When was the last time I had beer like this?
Not in a really long time.
So I will kind of nurse it. I won't, like, chug it, but... like halfway.
He studies you for a moment and nods approvingly as he fills up his own tankard again, this time taking some more time. And he frowns at you and says, "So, how long have you been in this manling city now?"
Shoot, how long have I been here? It's been almost, over a week, right?
Y'all have almost been here for 2 weeks, yeah.
Almost 2 weeks, okay. So, almost 2 weeks, Master.
He nods as he sips a little bit more from his tankard and says, "It's been rather busy around here since then, what with giant stones falling from the sky and ratmen appearing beneath the streets again. Reminds me of a time probably 50 years ago now."
What happened 50 years ago? If I may ask.
He frowns and says, "That was when there was a beastman raid. I remember fighting in that war. Pretty large herd. Not too bad. The damn forest, because the Ungi don't cut them down when they have the chance, can hide quite an army."
I've not encountered any beastmen in my travels, and my master used to take me up and down the world's edge. It must be a more common thing here in the Empire.
He nods and says, "They like to hide. gather up in numbers and come back against us. Kind of like the Thagaraki, except for they prefer to hide in the darkness of the trees rather than beneath our feet.
And these beastmen, are they as numerous as the Thagaraki?
He shrugs and says, "Can't say for certain. When they show up to fight, it seems as much, though the beastmen are far less cowardly foes." As he sips his ale for a moment, he glances over at you and says, "So do you miss the holds?"
Every day, Master.
He nods and says, "I've not been back to a hold of our kind in at least 2 centuries.
Wandering around underneath this open sky is unnerving. I still have not gotten used to it."
He shrugs. You get used to it eventually. Though I remember when I was but a lad and stepped out beneath it, I could have sworn I was going to fall straight up into it somehow."
There is a comfort of stone that I am missing.
He nods. That being said, the Ungi do have their slight charms from time to time, and they part with their gold for dwarf-crafted goods well enough.
My Umgi companions have been inquiring about male armor for themselves as well.
There's a small twinkle in his eye as he nurses at his beer some more and says, what individual doesn't hunger after dwarf-crafted supplies? It's our job to make sure they pay more than their fair share for it, of course."
Of course.
He shrugs and says, "You can use this forge to make things for your..." And he seems to pause for a moment, thinking of a word, and says, I'm thinking of the word I need. Your dowry, so to speak, if you need to. Most of the supplies here will cost you, though, of course I would highly recommend you pass the cost on to them, plus some, of course, for your efforts. It's not often that a dwarf bothers to forge good dwarf-crafted materials for some lowly Ungi.
They've not yet proven themselves dwarf friends, so I plan to charge them.
He nods and says, the only difference between a dwarf friend and one who isn't is knowing exactly how much they should be charged."
Indeed. I will look over at him and ask, have you ever made a mechanical hand before?
He frowns and scratches his chin for a moment and says, "That's more engineer work than mine, though it doesn't look I've made, shall we say, a replacement hand in my time. Mechanical one, no. That sounds too much like those waziks that you'd expect to find in Balakvar's type of work."
There is a barkeep where I stay, the innkeeper, he lost his hand against the Greenskins some time ago, used to be a soldier, and I've been pondering on giving him the ability to slay the foul beasts again.
He narrows his eyes at you for a moment. He says, "You're talking of Holst, aren't you?"
I am indeed.
He smirks and nods and says, "I've offered to make Holst a hand before. Damn daft bastard won't accept anything, though. Says he likes to keep it as a reminder."
Well, a steel one would be a reminder, and it would be useful, instead of that wooden one he carries around.
He shrugs. "I'm not sure who made it for him, but perhaps it was someone important. It seems to be precious to him in a way. Holst is a good friend of the Dawi. He's actually a dwarf friend, though I doubt he's ever told you."
No, he has not.
He shakes his head and says, "I know longbeards who don't keep secrets as well as that Ungi."
So I will drink the rest of my flagon and look at the forge and say, "Do you want to continue, Master?"
He nods and slams down his tankard and says, "Aye, let's put Grugny's fire into our work and see if we can do a slightly better job then, lad."
Alrighty, so same thing.
He does a great job.
Yay, I do too.
So do you. You forge the shield into an impeccable shape, and his emblems of a dwarven face come out fiery and looking immaculate, and he nods and passes them on to you to forge into the final product. And you successfully forge, once again, a high-quality product. He nods and takes it from you and puts it on the bench where he used to have the other three, though he has cleared them off and rests them up in a corner. And then he goes on to forge the final set of emblems. And he succeeds, and you do an excellent job of forging the shape of the shield. Better than any of the others you've made so far, in fact. He nods appreciatively, hands them off to you, and heads over to assist you with the final one.
Every time he comes over here.
It's because you're so adorably nervous. What?
I need the glass cleaner.
It's beneath the sink.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see if he can save
1
it.
second. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Let's see. You failed by 3 full degrees. Yeah, he easily saves that. You get a little nervous, and having tried to channel the winds of magic earlier, you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. But his steady hand saves the day, and he manages to forge the shield into an impeccable shape despite your occasional mistakes. And he gives you a hard look, but doesn't say anything, just slight disapproval in his face, before he takes the finished product and sets it down on the bench. And as he looks between those two and the 3 shields forged earlier, he nods and says, "Aye, we'll be able to make those daft bents from Altdorf give us a fine price for these. At least if they don't want me setting a grudge against them."
These are new dwarfs, you said.
He shrugs and says, "Some waziks from over in Altdorf. From a rival forge, if I understand it. Though they're just some rangers, apparently checking the roads between here and there for some reason. Can't say why."
Oh. Do you know where they're staying? Rangers usually have word of events beyond this Umgi city.
He scratches his chin and says, "I imagine when they get here, we'll hear of it. They should be here, from what I've heard, about 2 days from now."
Alright.
He shrugs and says, "But that's all of the assignments I have for now. I'll be working on some personal projects, but feel free to use the forge for whatever you wish until such time."
Thank you, Master.
He nods and leaves. And then, let me just double check something. So, looking at the empowering step, from what I understand of it, it seems that once you make a successful check, you're locked in for a month, but I don't think a failed check locks you in for a month.
Each test takes 20 minutes for a temporary rune and 1 month for a permanent rune. Yeah.
Either that... Oh, you know what? No. So I'm not going to count those checks, because what you have to do is you make your check at the end of the month. So once a month has passed, I will have you roll your empowering checks.
Okay.
But no rolls will count until then.
Okay.
So at the end of this month, which I've already made a note of when that's going to be in the campaign, you will make your first empowering check.
Is at the end of the month of when I started the inscription, or when I started, or
No,
when
the
I finished
inscription took place over the course of a week.
Okay.
Empowering.
I'm just asking when the month long.
The month began the day you finished the inscription.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's when I'm going to start it. And double checking for the Rune of Stone. It is indeed 3 months.
Yeah.
That being said, you do not need a forge of much quality. Like if you have your hammer and can provide enough heat, you are able to perform the runic chants you need. So if for whatever reason you have to be on the road, you may still perform those.
Okay.
Anywho. Okay, so for the next 4 days, you are able to try and forge anything you want. You have free reign.
Okay.
You are allowed to make 3 armorer checks per day, and certain types of equipment have certain amounts of required pass checks.
So, okay. I wanted to try and make some mail armor with sleeves. So a mail chest piece with sleeves.
Okay.
If it's like I said, if it's a certain quality, I'll go ahead and take it, and I'll give Foul my other chest piece. But we'll see how it comes out.
Okay.
Seeing as arms are like the only thing I kind of need. I don't know if I can add like arm pieces onto my piece that I already have, or no.
Yeah, you can.
Because it would probably be easier just to make the sleeve.
That being said, it will be bound to the quality of the prior piece.
Okay. Okay, then I don't want to do that. So, okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, you have 4 days to make a suit of mail armor. So for arms and body will require 6 successful checks if you want it to be best quality.
Okay. 6 successful checks. Whew. Okay.
Well, 6 checks. If you make them all successfully, you get best quality. If you miss 1, it's good quality. If you miss 2, I think it's average quality. If you miss 3, it's the one below that. And if you miss 4, it's the shittiest.
Okay.
Any further than that, and it's like not wearable.
Okay. Do I get my fortune points back since...
Yes, it's a new day.
Okay. So, let's go ahead and do the first 3.
Okay. Okay. Okay, you want to fortune point it?
Yeah, I'm going to. There we go.
All right, so a day's done. Work well done.
And before I head home on this day, is there a way I can go find Dorn?
What do you want to find Dorn for?
Because he seems to be the one that has the knowledge, any knowledge on what's going on with the missing Rune Lord. At least he's had it.
That will be coming up.
Okay.
Stay focused on your work for now.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go home and crash.
All right, you rest up.
When I return to the inn, are my party members still gone?
Some of them seem to have passed through, but you do not see any of them.
Okay.
The only one that seems to have returned and then left again is Merton. The other 2 have not returned.
Okay. Alright. So, next day? I guess I come back with no issues?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And fortune point that. God damn it!
One more.
Okay.
Nicely done.
And then... splitting them up.
All right, you need 2 more.
Okay.
Ooh.
One more.
If you get 1 more, you get best quality.
Damn.
Good quality. Womp womp.
Okay.
All right, you get good quality mail, which let me see here. Good quality armor reduces the encumbrance by 10%.
Okay.
So instead of it being an encumbrance of... So you got a sleeve mail shirt. Instead of being encumbrance of 80, it's an encumbrance of 72. All right, you have 2 days left. However, when you return home on this day, something new has occurred.
Okay.
So let's go back to the inn. You're about to meet someone.
One thing I also wanted to do during this session, Sotek, is I wanted to write a letter to my master, because I know I'm supposed to be doing that.
That's fine. You will be given time to do that shortly.
Okay.
You can read and write, correct?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right. As you enter the Iron Bull on this particular occasion, you see a small human girl sitting on a stool, spinning herself in circles, as Holst is working behind her.
I'm still at the forge.
Well, I thought you had hit home.
No, I had it home, but I'm still got the picture of the forge.
Oh, I get it. Mentally, you're still at the forge.
No. I like.
Oh, gotcha. Now you're good.
Yeah.
I was confused. I was like, are you gainsaying me, boy? Okay, sorry about that.
So, young girl swirling on the stool at the forge. Okay.
Yep, she has not noticed you yet.
Can you describe her to me?
She's definitely a child, probably no older than 10. She seems to be very much enjoying herself getting dizzy. She has kind of an infectious laughter, though as a dwarf you're not really affected by it too much. That being said, her garb is kind of dark in that it's almost all black and there's a little bit of death imagery depicted on it with like various skulls and a couple of symbols in Reichspiel. But she seems to be a very cheery individual.
I'm going to frown at the imagery on a child. But it's Omgis, so, they're decked anyway.
As you get that close, she catches you while she's spinning, and suddenly she slams her hands on the bar and stops. And she turns around, and as she gets up, her mouth is hanging open, and she takes a step to approach you, but, unfortunately, being as dizzy as she is, she just completely misses and falls flat on her face.
So I will blink at her and walk past to Holst.
Okay, as you walk...
Holst, her daughter?
Holst turns around and sees you and then looks at the girl lying prone on the ground for a moment and rolls his eyes and says, "No, let's just say I'm doing a favor for a friend. That being said, I'd prepare yourself if I were you."
Prepare me for what?
You hear someone intaking breath behind you as if they're about to say a lot of things very quickly.
I will sigh underneath my breath and turn around.
And literally, this girl is looking at you and her eyes are huge and she goes, "Oh my god, are you a dwarf, one of the mountain folk? I've heard so many things about your mountain folks. I've heard stories about dwarves from Father Frederick's, but I haven't actually met a dwarf before. There are a lot of dwarves here in Nuln, but I haven't actually met one. It's just really exciting and it's such a pleasure to meet you."
So I will cough and... Do you want to repeat that a little bit more slowly?
She her face turns a bit red and she goes, "Oh, sorry, this is embarrassing. Sorry, I've never met a dwarf before and I've heard so much about your people from my grandfather."
Your grandfather is whom?
She sort of pouts a bit. She says, "Why is it everyone I've been talking to lately doesn't know who Grandfather Ravenscloak is?" She jumps into the seat next to you and sits down and says, "Grandfather is the High Priest of Mor here in the city. He's pretty awesome. You'd probably like him. He's pretty quiet, though. He's not as active as I am. He doesn't like to talk too much. but he's done a lot of really cool things. He once killed a vampire in single combat, and he even hunted down and banished one of those southern kings, he called them, back to the land of the dead. Or at least that's what I've heard. I obviously didn't see any of this.
Sounds like quite a career.
She nods and said, yeah, he seemed to like reading more than he likes fighting, but once he was really good at it.
And he is now the High Priest of Mor here in Nuln.
She nods, and she stares at your beard for a moment and seems to be thinking about something very, very hard.
Don't touch the beard, lass.
She frowns and sits on her hands, and she says, how did you get it to grow so long?
Well, I go into the dark about an hour every day, and I just say grow.
Her eyes look really big, and Holst gives you a disapproving frown from behind the bar.
I have to smirk to myself.
She sort of leans forward. She says, if I do that, will I get to have a beard as long and pretty as yours?
I don't think it works that way for lasses such as yourself.
She pouts.
What are you doing in a bar like this, lass?
She shrugs and says, two of my friends brought me here. The pretty elf lady and the other priest. I think his name's Mikhail.
Yes, the black robe.
She nods and says, yeah, they brought me here. They said it was to keep me safe.
Safe from...
And then she sort of shrugs and says, they didn't really say much. They found me with Grandfather Frederick. He's dead now.
I am sorry to hear that, lass.
She shrugs and says, he knew it was coming. And she seems really chipper about it.
So I will look over to Holst kind of pleadingly.
He continues frowning at you and makes no attempt to save you.
Can I get an ale at least?
He nods slowly and pushes it towards you, and she goes, oh, do you drink a lot? I hear dwarves drink a lot.
It's part of what we do, lass.
She nods and says, can you drink more than anybody else can?
I've already proven that.
She frowns and says, I wish I could have seen that.
Ask your black robe friend about it sometime. I'm sure he'll delight in telling you the story.
She seems to make a strong mental note to actually ask him about this. She sort of she says, so where do you come from? The elf won't tell me where she comes from. She doesn't talk much.
I come from the Everpeak.
She frowns and says, Everpeak? I haven't heard of the Everpeak. The only place that dwarves come from that Grandfather Ravencloak ever told me about was some place called
Karazakrak.
And she says, yeah, that's it. I can't say that.
That is the Everpeak, lass.
She goes, oh! Grandfather Ravencloak said he went there once. He said it was really pretty.
One of the most beautiful cities in the world, lass.
She nods and says, he said he met a king there once. He said he drank with him, and then he stopped drinking after that. He never told me why, though.
Probably the same reason the young black robe won't drink with me anymore.
She giggles a bit. She says, if that's true, then I could probably guess what happened. Father Ravencloak did always seem to get queasy whenever he could smell alcohol.
So
She
how
sort
long
of
are you going to be staying here?
She shrugs and says, I guess. They don't really seem to have, unless you have a better place for me. I think that's what they're out looking for right now, though I can't be sure. Holst passes another ale to you and says, nah, the little lass will be staying here for now. She's safe here, and that's what I promised Frederick she would be.
Can you tell me what happened to Frederick?
He looks down at the girl, frowning, and she nods. She says, yeah, I killed him.
So I'm going to tilt my head and not say anything.
She sort of bums up and down. She said, he got hit by one of those little green things, and he made me promise to do something before that happened. And when he got hit by one, he asked me to kill him, so I did. I sent him to Mor, just like Mor told me I would. That's why he's my grandfather.
green things.
Holst leans forward and he says, Warpstone. If I had to guess, it was whatever caused that thing down the poor quarter. Glad Frederick didn't turn into one of those things.
When
He nods down to the girl. He nods down to the girl and said, "She did him a favor, dwarf. I can assure you that. I know the old bastard died with a smile on his face."
Well, no doubt did him a favor, but there's no favor in the Thagaraki doing what they're doing in this city without someone intervening. I don't know what is taking the officials of this Umgi city so long to take control of the situation.
Hull shrugs and says, "Hard to catch things you can't find." The little girl is bouncing up and down in her chair. She says, "I'm Anna, by the way. It's nice to meet you. I haven't heard your name yet, or maybe you said it, but I already forgot."
Name's Morek Glass.
Morek Glass?
Morek.
She nods, seeming to grin at her stupid joke. And she says, "Morek, that's a really dwarf-sounding name. It sounds like a name a rock would have."
We try to imitate certain sounds, lass.
She nods, and then she sort of stares at you for a long moment and tilts her head. She says, "You're looking for another dwarf, right?"
I am. How do you know that?
She nods and says, "'Cause grandfather tells me things. Not grandfather Ravenscloak. He was my here grandfather, but my other grandfather tells me things too. He said you're looking for someone."
Who is your other grandfather?
She rolls her eyes and goes, "Pfft, more, dummy."
Oh.
Holst seems to pale at this line of talk and pretends to be meticulously wiping at a spot that's quite obviously already clean.
You have more, lass, and I have Gazul. That is why I don't know so much about your history and lore.
She shrugs and says, "I can't say I know much of dwarf religion. That being said, Moore told me you'd find your friend, though he said he's already dead now."
So I will be kind of startled at that. Does your grandfather tell you any specifics?
She nods and says, "He said you'll learn about it tomorrow, but he said that you're not going to be able to save him in time. Though you might be able to find the one that did it. He said it's really ugly." Once again, her positivity is completely unfaltering.
And where have Mikhail and the elf gone?
She shrugs.
When did they leave?
She says, I think they left about halfway through midday. They seem kind of concerned.
Have you seen Merton at all?
She frowns and says, "Merton? I don't think..." And then she sort of pauses. She says, "Oh, you mean the guy with the funny accent?"
Yes, him.
She nods and said, "Yeah, I played a game with him. He passed through earlier. I didn't get to see him much, though. He said he'd be back."
Well then. I will kind of look at Holst and not know what else to do.
Holst sort of looks at the girl and he says, "Anna, would you be a dear and help me get some things out from the cellar?" And she nods enthusiastically and runs off.
I will thank Grimnir under my breath.
Holst turns to you and says, "Sorry about that. She's been rather hard to keep a hold of. That girl has a lot of energy. From what I understand, she's used to digging graves all day. Deceptively, she has a little too much energy to be holed up in here all day. I'll have to find some chores for her to do."
I'm sure you'll come up with some useful accommodations to keep her busy.
He nods and then looks at you with a frown and says, "Do you think she's right then, about who you're looking for?"
I pray to the gods that she is wrong.
He nods and says, "Well, you best get some rest then, my friend."
Let us hope I can rest now with the knowledge that she has imparted to me.
He shrugs and says, well, missing sleep ain't gonna change things.
It might. It might.
He nods to you and says, Master Dwarf, and then takes away your empty drinks.
So, what time of day is it?
It's pretty late. You are back, after you left the forge after sundown.
Okay, so I will go up and I will say a couple prayers to the dwarf gods, especially Thungi, that that I can find some more information out about the Rune Lord, because that's grave tidings for my entire kin.
All right. Morning comes.
I will wander downstairs and keep an eye out for the energetic girl to try and tiptoe around.
You do not see her this morning. She's likely still sleeping.
Oh, thank the gods. So, I will go up to Holst, if he's there.
Yeah, he's there.
And I will pull out my old mail shirt, and I will hand it to him and say, if you can, Holst, the next time you see the black robe, give this to him.
He whistles and says, Shed armor, dwarf.
And it's the old armor that I was wearing. I resized it for him.
He raises an eyebrow and says, it's pretty rare that your folk give something away. No offense, of course, Master Dwarf.
Oh, I'm not giving it away, trust me.
He smirks knowingly and says, I'll be sure to get it to him. We are
Thank you.
5 days in. Okay.
And then I will head out to the forge.
All right. As you enter the Dwarven Quarter, you see that there are a lot more of your folk about than there have been recently. And it seems rather... like, everyone seems pretty excitable. You do spy a couple of new faces, but nothing... but you don't really catch on to anything in particular. But as you arrive at Snorri's Forge, you find both Snorri and Dorn waiting for you.
So they're probably going to see me in a very dour and glum mood.
Yeah. Let me get Dorn out here. And make him a giant
dwarf.
You get to the entrance. As you approach, they're both waiting for you. Dorn looks rather stern-faced, and Snorri looks a little bit downtrodden.
And they will see that I am just the same, if not worse.
Dorn nods
Definitely
to you.
worse, actually.
Dorn nods to you and says, Dreng Throm, my friend.
Directrom.
He frowns and says, The dwarves we were waiting for from Altdorf have arrived. Unfortunately, it seems they found something on their travels.
What can you tell me of what they found?
He walks past you and says, Follow me.
I will follow him.
Okay, you, Snorri, and Dorn go to a nearby building that you have seen a few times. In Kazalit runes above it is called Valaya's Rest. And you know it to be a small temple to her, made out of stone. And in it are a few dwarves milling about, two of which are priestesses. You see a dwarf lying in one of the beds, and he does not look very much in the sense of alive. You see a very, very well-made and powerful-looking suit of armor on a stand next to him, and a rather young dwarf standing off to the side looking around rather nervously. Snorri takes a seat at the table, as does Dorn, and he gestures for you to join them.
Can I look at the dwarf in the bed?
Roll a perception check as you head over to the table. And you're not able to get much of a glimpse as you walk to sit down. Dorn sits heavily and he gestures to the young dwarf. And he says, This is one of the beardlings that came over here from Altdorf, and the young blonde dwarf nods his head to you, Thringtrom.
Bertram.
Dorn frowns and says, "They found the remainder of the caravan from Zufbar on the road from the north to the south. They were attacked."
By whom? Or by what?
The younger dwarf looks up and he says, "Well, we didn't actually find anything that had attacked them. We just found the bodies, really."
And evidence suggests of any type of attack that we can garner?
He nods and says, "Goblins, sir."
Fucking Groby.
Dorn pinches his nose and says, "It wasn't just goblins. Come look at this." And he leads you over to the body the sisters, or the Valayan priestesses are tending to, and she quietly steps away. As you approach, you can see the dwarf is most certainly dead, and probably has been for a while at least. And you see that it looks like something sharp and crudely made, by the way it tore at his throat, took him out. And he points down and he says, "Definitely a puncture wound of some sort from some kind of spear. Looks like Groby made work. Maybe beastman, but my bet's on goblin due to the size."
So I will bow my head to the dwarf. Groby and Beastman, you think?
He shrugs and says, "Could be both, could be neither. But what I called you for was to look at this." And he steps over to the armor. Looking at it, you immediately recognize that this is definitely the armor an Ironbreaker would wear. Just as powerful, just as designed for defense. But as you look at it with horror, you realize something has managed to puncture holes in it, despite its legendary defense. And there's something liquidy, something gooey, around some of the puncture holes. And he gestures to it and he says, "Some kind of poison. We're not able to identify it right away. I was hoping if maybe on your travels you've seen something similar to this."
I probably would have seen something similar. This is out of character. Under Carrot Peaks, when I was there with my master.
You may take either a perception check or a common knowledge dwarf check for this.
I'll do common knowledge dwarf.
Okay. Oh, very good. As you approach, you deftly put your finger on it, on this little liquid, and the moment it comes in contact with your skin goes a little bit numb, and you have a very irritated sense that you have experienced something like this venom very recently.
So, thinking back to the pork order, and is that what I'm gathering?
No, think more of giant and has 8 legs.
Spider venom.
Dorn frowns and he says, "A spider punching through Gromrel plate?"
Maybe not the spider itself, but this is its venom, no doubt.
He leans down and runs his hand over to the punctures that are fairly far apart.
Do you think the fangs could be?
He frowns.
Up?
He looks at you with a frown and he says, "I didn't think spider at first. I know there are some large ones that live around here, but I didn't think there was one of this size. You figured we would have noticed it by now if it were attacking caravans."
My companions and I fought several massive spiders out in the Reichwald just a few days ago.
He raises an eyebrow and he says, "How large?"
So I will give him an idea of the giganticness.
Okay, so about the size of a... You would probably describe it as the size of certain kinds of mining equipment. Yeah, bigger than a wagon. He nods and says, "That's pretty large, lad, I'll give you that. But whatever did this is probably considerably larger than that. Not the biggest kind I've seen. I wouldn't consider it one of those monstrosities that attacked my hold back when I lived in Balakvar. But nonetheless, this is cause for concern. If this beast is out there and needs to be found and be put down."
When I first went out into the Reichwald with my friends, or not my friends, my companions, there was
a good word is Dalry. which means people who have proved themselves in battle but aren't really
Yeah.
friends.
We found a cave, and at that time it was just a cave full of spider webs, probably some of the creatures inside, but when we came back later, there are many more. They might be spawning from that cave or around the parts.
He frowns as he returns to his seat. Snorri is thoughtfully stroking his beard and looks at the younger dwarf and says, "You there, lad. You said you found this dwarf alive when you located him." The younger dwarf nods and says, "Aye, my lord, we found what was left of the caravan, but there were tracks in the ground looking as if something had been dragged off. He was alive, but only briefly. His final words were, he said, it took him. It took Lord Ragnar. Grungni, forgive me." And then he was no longer with us. He moved on to his ancestors' halls.
Took the Rune Lord. I'll turn the door and say, took the Rune Lord.
Snorri,
This cannot be allowed.
take a common knowledge dwarf check.
Okay.
Do you want to fortune point it?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, based on the name Ragnar and knowing that this Rune Lord came from Zufbar, you have a sinking feeling in your gut that they are talking about a moderately venerable Rune Lord named Ragnar. Let's see, what's his full name? Ragnar Lightbinder. He was not the most powerful Rune Lord at Zufbar, but he was in the top 3.
And this is the one I was sent.
You were supposed to find, yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell them, this is why my master sent me here, to find out what happened to Ragnar. He was supposed to be bringing knowledge, great knowledge, to the rest of the runesmiths. He never arrived.
All the dwarves look extremely grim. Dorn looks back at the dwarf that has the corpse behind him off to the side and said, "We'll be sending this one and what we could find of his kin back to Zufbar. It would be good for someone to avenge them, for someone to make sure that their oaths to ensure that whatever Ragnar was bringing makes it to this city is fulfilled." And he gives you a hard look.
Grudges will be reckoned.
He nods and says, "Will you give your oath, then? Will
On
you
the
give your
anvil.
oath, Morek, to retrieve the body of Rune Lord Ragnar and put an end to this beast?"
My oath on the anvil.
All the dwarves nod solemnly. "I will be sure to send grudgment to Karazakarak, and I will send note of your oath as well, so they might enter it into the book. The High King will hear of this."
Does the dwarf laying down have a name that has passed?
Gothri.
Godfrey.
Gothri Hammerson, if I recall correctly. All the dwarves are nodding quietly.
I will avenge him too.
He nods, and Snorri reaches over and takes a firm grip of your arm, and he says, "If you need any assistance, lad, be sure to let me know. My forge arm is yours. This grudge must be avenged. I cannot stand to think of what the Groby might be doing to Lord Ragnar's body, if he's not still with us."
So I will look over at the blonde dwarf. How long ago did you find these? How long ago did you find this attack?
He scratches his chin for a moment. He says, "About 2 days, but the tracks that we found of whatever behemoth was moving through dragged whatever it was dragging. It definitely went into the Reichwell, not too far north here of the city. It seemed that they had been harassed for some time. What we found left of their caravan, it looked like not just goblins attacked them. It seems like goblins just finished them off."
There were no other survivors, yes?
He shakes his head.
Very well. I will begin my search as soon as I possibly can.
All the dwarves nod. And Dorn stands up and tells the younger dwarf, Go to one of my lieutenants and tell him to bring some Bugmans in here, a small cask of it, perhaps Bugman's troll brew. We need to drink to make sure these oaths are sealed in good faith. And the younger dwarf nods and runs out.
So, do I think it would be prudent to tell them about what I heard last night, or would they think it's just hogwash coming from a little girl?
They would probably find it extremely concerning, if not magical in nature. And as they don't necessarily have as best of an understanding as you do of, like, what you're dealing with, and they don't interact much with Ungi of that faith, they'd probably find it more disconcerting than anything else.
So I will actually ask, what do you know of one known as the Baleful One?
Dorn looks a little bit perplexed, but Snorri, you hear him suck in wind a little bit. And the younger dwarf returns and puts the keg very reverently on the table and then leaves with his head hanging low, glancing at the corpse on the way out. And Dorn broaches taps the keg and pours out a mug for each of you. Drink it slowly. This stuff's pretty rare.
Oh yeah, super slow.
And it tastes fantastic. Like, Snorri takes a sip and seems to pause for a moment, reveling in it before he brings himself back to the moment.
Yeah.
He glances at you and says, I was here the last time the Baleful One came. Right terrible creature, that one. Although we managed to take it to battle outside of the city, it was a damn mess. That thing could have leveled this entire area if it had made it this far.
What exactly is it?
At this, he frowns at you and says, If you've been speaking to Holst, then unfortunately I can't tell you anything more about the actual thing itself than they can. No one ever laid eyes on it. Not Dwarf, nor Elgi, nor Ungi. No one saw it.
Yet you brought it to battle. You brought its army to battle.
He nods and says, Aye.
What
Nasty
army,
tribe, that.
What army followed it?
Beastmen. Horrific creatures. Monsters. All sorts of abominations. But the Beastmen were the most multitudinous of them all. They were everywhere. It was like an ocean of writhing monsters and abominations. My axe drank good that day.
So I will go ahead and proceed to tell them about the witch hunter and what he said about the Baleful One, and how my personal thoughts are that it's having something to do, because it can't be a coincidence that it's suddenly starting to show up these, along with these massive stones, and now this grave thing.
Roll a fellowship check.
Okay.
Just straight fellowship.
Should I fate point or fortune point that?
That's up to you.
I probably won't be doing anything else today. Yeah, I'll go ahead. Worse.
Well, actually, you'll still do okay. As you relate to this, Dorn gets a more and more serious look on his face, and Snorri pales a little bit and nods and says, Aye, sounds like it did last time. Things started going wrong, things started appearing, we ignored it for too long, and then it became a all-out war on our doorstep. Dorn crosses his hands and takes another long sip of Bugman's and frowns at you and says, Perhaps I have been wrong in my judgment recently. We've not been really treating well with the Countess and been pushing aside her sayings of doom, as Umgi are quick to react to such nonsense. But based on what I'm hearing, perhaps us Dalwi need to work better on allying ourselves to the Umgi. It sounds like they might need our help after all.
If everything in my head is falling together like it seems to be, then I think we'll need each other's help here in the coming weeks.
He nods, and he pours himself another full mug as well as the other two of you, and holds it up for a toast, and he says, "Then I shall give my oath that us Dawi will assist the Countess in purging whatever evil lies beneath their streets, so that we can push back this evil. You, until the next time we meet, I make the oath that with Snorri's arms, your wavering your infallible courage, and my strength, we will push back this darkness. You will reclaim Ragnar's body for us, and strike down the monster that killed him, so that we may have vengeance. I will purge the sewers beneath of the Skaven, and Snorri will assist us in our endeavors."
My oath
Snorri,
on the anvil, and with every last breath in my body, it will be so.
Snorri rolls his eyes at these young beardling declarations, but slams his mug into Dorn's regardless.
I will do the same.
Okay, and as all your mugs clank into one another, Dorn nods and chugs his drink, as does Snorri.
I will do as well.
Okay, you get pretty lightheaded, because Bugman's is like some serious shit. In fact, roll a consume alcohol check. Yeah, you're feeling it pretty rough.
Yeah.
You're hanging in there, but it's
worth it.
You all nod, and Dorn stands up and says, "I have to make arrangements then to meet with the Countess. If you succeed in your goal, be sure to send me a missive."
I will do so.
He nods and leaves. Snorri looks over at you and nods and says, "I wish you luck then. Try not to die out there. We've already lost too many good Dawi."
With today's tidings, we have lost far, far too much knowledge as well.
He nods and says, "Such is the way of our people. I hope you can gain vengeance for us, at least in that."
I will do my utmost.
He also leaves.
I'm gonna take one last look at the armor, and just to fix it in my mind, and as well as the dwarf, to kind of build up my own anger, and then leave.
Okay. And that will be the end of this session.
Can I get or shop for something? Really
Yes,
quick,
you may
or
shop real quick.
because I did want to try and find that best quality axe.
While you're moderately drunk, yeah.
Yeah. I'd probably do it in the dwarf quarter since I'm already here.
Okay. And you're looking for a best quality axe?
Yeah.
Let me see. Let's see. Weaponry. Okay. Whew. All right. Roll a straight D100. See if you can locate one.
$28.
Not bad. All right, you find a rather impressive-looking axe as you're roaming about, made by a dwarf, no less. Rather hardy-looking individual. You may perform a evaluation check to see what the actual quality of the weapon is, because he claims all of his equipment is the best there is.
Yeah, of course he does. Let me check something really quick here. Okay. $41 out of 51.
You mean 51 out of 41?
Yeah, yeah.
He appears to be telling the truth.
Mm.
And he's charging a pretty outrageous price for it.
How much is he asking?
He is demanding at least 100 gold crowns.
I don't think I have any fate points left, do I? Or is it New Day?
No, it's not today.
Yeah, it's not a New Day. Yeah, I'm gonna pass that by because I don't have enough gold for it yet.
Okay. Unfortunately, dampening your drunken mood a little bit,
Yeah.
you hand back the very beautiful axe, and he yells at you to get out of his shop if you're not going to buy anything.
Alright.
That it?
That is it. Besides that, I'm just gonna go and write a letter to my master and send it off.
Take a read-write check.
Where did I put that?
Alright, you write an amazingly crafted letter. Your drunkenness almost seems to give you, like, lend you the flawless words to write an impeccable letter. All you need to really do is send me at some point, like, what the gist of it is.
Okay.
And I will be sure it's taken care of. But it is, like, a fabulously crafted letter.
Okay.
Alright, and that's the end of the session.
Alrighty.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. Catch you next time. Bye.